deep dive interviews with music gear inventors, builders, creators, and tone chasers. The Gear Gab Podcast with Eric Dahl uncovers the behind-the-scenes stories of the music gear that inspires us. And now, here's your host, Eric Dahl.
Thank you for joining the Gear Gab Podcast. I'm pleased to have on someone who I've known for a number of years. I interviewed him on the Rock and Review TV show here in Nashville a long time ago. But now we have the president of NS Design, Ned Steinberger. Ned, thank you for joining the show.
Pleasure.
You know, there's so many fun things to talk about, with your history, Ned, and certainly your many accomplishments, but also you're not resting on those with NS Design and all of the new things you're doing. But for people joining the podcast, I'd like to talk a little bit about your history growing up to where, raised by an artist, a mother that was an artist, and then a father that played flute and was a Nobel laureate.
Well, he was a lot better at physics than he was at playing the flute. I'll tell you that right now.
Well, but he got awards, so yeah, but I think it's interesting that, I'd read Ned and talk about this. And I love it that you're in your workshop where you make the magic happen, but did you build your first workshop at 13?
Did I build my first workshop where?
At 13 years old.
Well, what happened is that we lived in a suburban area of New York City, and we had a little house in a row with a bunch of other little houses, but we had a basement. And my father, who we were just talking about, made things as a young person as well. For example, he made himself a sailing dinghy when he was 16 years old, okay, and that kind of thing. And he had the opportunity to have shop access where he was growing up. And so in our house, we had a very simple shop. And my father Jack was not into power tools. He liked to do everything with hand tools, with planes and, drill a hole with a hand operate. I'm not saying he never used an electric drill, but he was very focused on doing things by hand and sort of an aesthetic around that. So I learned a little bit from him. Age 12 or so, I started getting interested. There weren't many kids my age in the neighborhood where I lived, and so I was, had a lot of time on my own, and I liked making things. And it turns out to be the core of my whole, life's work is making stuff. But it started young, and so then I did go out and, buy some power tools because I wasn't really interested in doing everything by hand.
Not the old school way. I think
Neighbor saw, and this electric drill and this type of thing. And then I bought a drill press. And this, I've told this story before. So if you've heard it already, you can interrupt me. But one of the things that happened at age 13, and I was also into, mowing lawns and, making a few bucks and fixing lawn mowers. All that stuff is related, making things, fixing things, understanding how they work. And so I wanted to buy a go-kart, a powered go-kart. And my father said, no, you can't do that. It's not legal. It's not good. And again, this goes back to his, wanting to go sailing, not motorboating, and being kind of down on power, things that are, he certainly was not into automobiles and that sort of thing. Although I was, but that's another story. I'm not my father. Anyway, we had a big fight about it, and wasn't used to fighting with my father, but I was just really incensed. I had earned this money. I wasn't asking him to pay for it. It was my money, and but he was very, very adamant. And then one day he shows up at the house with a Delta Unisaw. I don't know if you know what a Delta Unisaw is, but it's a very high quality table saw.
Right.
A circular table saw. It was it was an 8-inch, which is a little unusual, a little smaller than usual, but and he probably got a little bit of an extra, he bought it used in New York. There's a whole kind of scene in New York where they have used equipment and so on. So he went to the trouble to bring this back, and it showed a certain level of respect for what I had been doing. And of course, the thing about a table saw too is it's quite a dangerous machine potentially. By the way, I got them all still. A lot of for woodworkers, they might be, like that, okay, because it's so easy to cut your fingers off. And so, again, it points out that my father was not concerned that it would be dangerous for me to have a go-kart. He objected in principle, okay? So, and here he bought this dangerous machine for me at age 13. And of course, gave me the lecture, about safety and all that. He didn't want me to be cutting my fingers off, but he thought I could handle it. And I did. Although, and I'll wrap this up because we're taking too long on this, but at one point, within a couple of weeks when I had the table saw, I reached down to turn the machine off with a switch. And I actually, without realizing, I touched my finger to the blade. Here it was going. And I took about a 64th of an inch of skin off the end of, my finger for a width of 1/8 of an inch. So I got away with it.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, when my knees buckled, I knew how incredibly stupid that was. And maybe that's part of the reason I still have all my digits is I really learned a lesson there that you cannot take anything for granted. You've got to be very, very careful. And so anyway, those are my early shop days. I was into it. And one thing is that I'm dyslexic. I didn't know it at the time that I was dyslexic. Even that word wasn't used that much, but I took remedial reading and other kinds of things that have to do really with what dyslexia is about. And so all my life, starting from a young age, I kind of made my own discoveries a little bit, whereas other people would say, okay, I want to make a chair. Okay, let me get a book that tells you how to make a chair. And I would just make a chair. Okay, it's got 4 legs, and I would just go for it without actually learning that much about what people have done. And I'm not saying that's a good idea necessarily, but it certainly has worked for me, that kind of discover how things are made through my own exploration rather than learning, what other people have to teach them. It's kind of crazy in a way because, you're just sort of reinventing the wheel if you don't know that somebody already invented it. But
Right.
and what's funny too about that, it's a non sequitur here, but I tend to be credited for inventing a headless bass and guitar. But in truth, I didn't know about these other people who had made headless instruments, but I wasn't equipped to make a headless instrument. Not at all.
But you definitely, and we're going to get into it, you definitely put them on the map and made them internationally recognized. And I wanted to talk about on this also, Ned, to where you mentioned furniture, to where before you went to college or sculpture, were you already making furniture?
Oh, I made furniture from the get-go, tables, chairs, whatever, and that's what I would do. I made a music stand and stuff like that, practical stuff that you could make that was interesting to me, that I thought there was obviously chairs and tables are a lot of that stuff, unfortunately, was with my mother when she had a fire in her art studio, and so a lot of the original things I made got fried. But anyway, that's how I started, and I also really had to. I'm not a musician. I think that's pretty well known. I got into that sort of accidentally, if that's the
Well,
right way.
and that's what I want to talk about with, when you went to college, when you went to Maryland Institute College for your degree, it's like, why did you choose sculpture?
Oh, well, first of all, I want to just say that I went to the University of Colorado for a year and pretty much failed. And that's when I went to art school. And yeah, I made sculptures too when I was younger, when I was in high school. Small sculptures, different, made out of wood, abstract sculptures generally. 3D is my thing. And of course, there's this huge evolution of, the difference between 3D and 2D is now much blurred because on my screen, I can have a 3D image, very, very complete. And I love that. And I'm not really, painting is my mother was a painter. I'm fantastic and all, but it's not me.
Well, and I wanted to bring up, and I guess it was after you got your degree, once you, were studying sculpture, but with the Brooklyn Woodworking Co-op, was that where you met Stuart Spector and started working with him on the NS base design?
Indeed. That's what happened. That's why we're talking here today. If it wasn't for Stuart, God bless him, I'd still be making chairs. Well, which was fine, but musical instruments are much more fun.
Well, and it's interesting to me too, Ned, to where once again, with so many of your designs that we'll dive into, but with the NS design for Spectre, that it's still in production. It's probably still the best selling model for Spectre bases. I mean, and you look at how many,
No, the Spectre, yeah, no, it's quite amazing. And that's the nature of the musical instrument world and business. Imagine, I've said this too so many times, but imagine going down to your local car dealer and buying a brand new Chevy that was designed in 1945. I don't think that's going to happen. Or 1950. Let's get it. That's a Fender, 1950. Okay, or 48. All around that. And so, it's a different world. The Fender is still the most popular guitar and bass today. Was designed 75 years ago or 80 years ago. And so it's just a very different world. And that's what, Spectre NS bass was accepted and appreciated and doesn't go away. It kind of lasts forever almost. I'm not sure how long it lasts, but it's...
Well, and what's interesting to me about that bass design too, Ned, is having played those NS basses by Spectre before, is that how ergonomic the bodies are. Because before, certainly like you mentioned with Leo Fender and the Gibson designs after that with basses, a number of companies with different basses, Rickenbacker and so on. But with the NS design that you innovated, it's like it's very contoured with the body, with the horns, with the whole landscape of the bass, to where it feels like it's more like a part of your body.
Well, that's certainly how I approached it, and that's how I ended up getting into the headless stuff too, around ergonomics. And but the connection to my previous work was seating, and I did get involved with seating, and I actually even got a job as a designer of kind of an internship before I met Stuart. Or more or less simultaneously with that, we ended up in this co-op, which was a great thing. We all pooled our resources, and I was doing cabinet work to make a living. Building shelves and cabinets, and the like for well-to-do New Yorkers, and that's how we ended up in the co-op, because I could do that work with much lower overhead. Shared 6 ways instead of being responsible for yourself, for everything on your own. And that's a lot of what made these other explorations possible, because I didn't have to just work round the clock to pay the rent, to feed myself and so on, because the cost of the monthly rent and so on was reduced dramatically. Then I had time to just play around, do my thing, have some fun.
Well, and that drove you to in 1980 when you launched the Steinberger Sound Corporation. And at what point, Ned, did you decide to go? Certainly, talking about the L2 bass and everything that you released a year later. When did and you'd worked in wood for so long, but what drove you to start manipulating carbon fiber and other materials to achieve what you wanted to, and with the headless instruments? What was the catalyst?
Failure. That was the catalyst. Okay. In the sense that, and by the way, I'm a big believer in learning from your mistakes. When you learn from your mistakes, you learn on another level than what you learn in a book. That kind of goes back a little bit to my lack of. It's not that I don't read books and enjoy books, or I don't want to make it sound too extreme, but still, um, uh, trying things out, experimenting, and then seeing where you go wrong can be a very powerful experience. And what happened was I was into the headless idea, and I built this super lightweight headless bass, and it sounded terrible. It was a disaster from a sonic point of view. I had just ideas that were just wrong, and I was very, very disappointed in that, and almost gave up the venture at that point. I was so discouraged. But eventually I started thinking about a little more, why didn't it sound good? And I started to explore that. And, I took that instrument and I bolted it down to this big, heavy workbench. I clamped it down, and the sound just completely changed. And all of a sudden, we're starting to sound pretty interesting and pretty good. And, so I learned a lot from that initial failure that has guided me over the years. And I've learned more since then. Thank God. I've learned a lot about how things, and I keep learning, and that's what makes it fun.
Well, and I remember, and you and I talked about it before, Ned, to where the first time, I played one of the L2 basses, and certainly with your design and going headless with that concept, but how balanced it was, whereas, as you and I both know, with a number of basses, a number of instruments in general, will sometimes be neck heavy. But with your design,
Called neck dive. Yeah. Yeah. These basses are extremely prone to that. These days you can get lightweight tuners, from Goto or whatever, where back in those days, all you had were these heavy tuners, and that's what motivated that whole thing. Again, it's ergonomics, and to take that weight that's projected. And the reason a bass is problematic is a long neck. Okay, so that takes that weight and puts it further and further out, and makes it more and more problematic. So then, by putting that weight onto the body, it just fixed it. I mean, as far as the neck dive issue, and again, if it wasn't for that, we would not be here having this conversation, because that's what drew me into this world. I just said, wait a minute, this is cool, and I got to take it as far as I can. And what a wonderful opportunity for me, and what the work I want to do or whatever. I just went for it.
Well, and that's what amazed me too, is that time. And, it had to be gratifying to you, as you mentioned, after trying some designs and feeling that they had failed, and then evolving to the L2 bass, which was, the catalyst for everything with the Steinberger instruments that you designed. But then to win all those awards, and then, it's like, and you and I talked to, is like, when I just remember where, the Steinberger bass, and then as you rolled out the guitar designs, they were everywhere. It went from 0 to like 300 in like the span of like a year or two.
Well, I think that might be slightly overstated, but yes, there was, what happened was really MTV is what happened. And we did connect with some really respected high-level artists who said, wait a second, this is cool. I want to play this. Okay. And that's what made it possible for us to actually, I've never been a particularly good businessman. And if it wasn't for MTV and this free advertising that we got, it was amazing. People Sting and, Eddie Van Halen and all kinds of great stuff going on visually that people could see. And then that's what made it possible for us to.
I remember seeing Joe Walsh in concert playing one of your Steinbergers, and it was like going, oh my gosh, there's Joe Walsh playing Steinberger.
People. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and also in 1984, the PBS Enterprise special that aired, it seems like that gave the Steinberger Company and yourself a big lift also, just kind of explaining, featuring you and the instruments to a broader scale of people besides MTV, which has already hit people like myself.
Well, I would say this, that I'm certainly, that was really interesting to have that, to be part of that or to be the subject of that TV show or whatever. But it's artists. That's what drove. In other words, you're a musician or whatever, amateur, professional, what have you. I mean, it's all, I don't make a big distinction there. Music is a beautiful thing. And if you're sort of just a beginner, that's a beautiful thing. If you are super accomplished, that's even more beautiful, but it's still the same category for me. When a really accomplished artist chooses your or any instrument, that has a big impact on, so, ooh, wow, he just did that with that instrument. I want one. It's perfectly logical. It is not that people are totally naive and they think that all of a sudden they're going to be Sting because they buy a Steinberger bass, but it's hugely impactful in terms of selling instruments and maintaining a business and keeping it going. Originally I really tried very hard to license the design. I licensed the Spectre NS bass to Stewart, and that was great. But then when it came to this headless instrument, I tried to find a company to work with, and I couldn't. I mean, I talked to, Music Man and, all kinds of established companies, and just, it was too crazy. They didn't want to go there. And I don't blame them, honestly. I don't take it personally. It's just reality.
Well, and so innovative, I think I told you the one of the first times I, at my local music store when I was living in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, at Shivelbein's Music, and they got one of your Steinbergers in, and got to play it, so balanced and everything like you and I had talked before. But then they took it, and there was a carpeted wall in the music store, and took it and hit it against the carpeted wall and said, now play it. And it was still in tune. And there was like no other instrument that you could pick.
No, and my partner at the time, and still my partner today, Harold Kuffner, he was the one to say, we have to take this to the show in Frankfurt, Germany, right? And this is the big show in those. That show's gone now, but then it was the biggest show in the world. we got ourselves a little 10 by 10 booth, and he had these headless guitars there, and nobody was paying any attention. Okay. And so he started, he had the guitar plugged in, the bass. We only had basses then. And he starts banging it on the floor and go, oh, all this sound, everybody's jumping around. What's happening? And how sure you got Cupid. And then he'd pull it back up and say, it's still in tune. Okay. So God bless him. He used his imagination, and but it wasn't, things. It wasn't a piece of cake. I mean, it was always a struggle, to make it work. Yeah.
Well, and speaking of which, I think, and certainly I've owned, several of your instruments over the years and will probably own more. But one of the things that got me was when I saw Mike from Mike and the Mechanics using one, and then I had to have a GR4. It's like going, and that was your model that had, the composite.
No, and Mike was a big factor in the development of that instrument. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like when I saw and heard him playing that instrument, I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to have one of those.
Did I tell you the story of how that instrument came to be?
No.
Mike was playing the guitar, and he had like a 10-year-old or 8-year-old son. And his son said to him, this may not be, this is maybe myth, I don't know, but it's what I believe it to be true, but I can't guarantee it. All right.
I'm in.
His son said to him, Dad, why are you playing a toy guitar? This was an L series instrument, very, very small, and I think it got Mike Rutherford was starting to think, well, why am I playing a toy guitar? He wanted a bigger body. And so we were able to, we got some help from Roger Griffin and Geffen Griffin. I'm so bad with names. And Roger was a big contributor to what we did. And I remain very appreciative to this day. And so that's how that we got into, more. And people were asking me to design a bigger size body. And I was struggling with how to, come up with something that I felt comfortable with. A lot of the reason that the original Steinberger guitars and basses were so minimal was that was a way to, you can't just take a Strat and chop the head off and expect anybody to deal with it. You have to create a new overall instrument. And so I had a little trouble connecting the headless to a more conventional body style. And I got some help from Roger. And as I say, I appreciate it to this day. And
well, and what you did with the GR and with the GM series, to where once again I think it broadened. And Steinberger was always such a well-known instrument name already established with unique designs, but then adding a more traditional style body to the headless form, it just...
it was huge. I mean, I'm not sure what the numbers are, but I think more people, were comfortable with that than with the very narrow body and so on.
And they were a great price point also, and still, stayed in tune great, and were, certainly with the carbon fiber necks, were impervious, to going out of tune as easy.
Well, and the carbon fiber is also sonically, it affects the tone absolutely, and gives you, more even sustain throughout the range of the neck, and it also is much more stable in terms of changes in temperature and humidity, especially wood instruments than wood. You got to readjust the truss rod, and hopefully it works. Hopefully you know how to adjust it, because if you're a musician, how can I put it without saying something I would regret, but let's just say that lot of musicians are not mechanically inclined. And so,
That's true.
and God bless them, I'm mechanically inclined and I can't play a note. So, see, I can play a G chord. So that's by that chord. That's about it.
And boy, you can hit the solid notes on a bass.
So, but anyway, we all have our talents, and I'm a huge admirer of musicians. In fact, I think I admire musicians more than another musician might, because it's magic to me. I don't know how the hell you can do that stuff. But so it's great to be in a position to support that, to provide tools for making music and for artistic endeavors.
Definitely. Well, and I was going to bring up that, in 1987, then you sold Steinberger to Gibson. And then 3 years later, you launched in 1990, you launched NS Design. You couldn't rest down. You couldn't take a rest for very long there.
Well, what happened was that when I sold Steinberger Sound to Gibson, I was expecting to, be with that company for the duration. I really was so excited to now be a designer and not be a business manager, because that's not my first preference. And not to, I don't want to sound like I'm whining or complaining. I mean, I do plenty of whining and complaining, but that's not proud of it. Anyway, the thing is that it didn't work out. Let's just say that. There was Henry Juskowitz there running the show, and he and it's not that I had a personal gripe so much against him. His way of doing business didn't work for me. And I said, thank you very much. I need to go back on my own. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. But the idea of going into Bode Electric Instruments made perfect sense to me, because I didn't want to be butting up against my previous work. I wanted a new world to explore.
Right.
And of course, I was very excited about 42-inch strings.
Well, it was so interesting to me too, and I can't believe it's been 36 years now, but it has, since NS Design launched. But with the Bode instruments, once again, like I was thinking, like you were just saying, Ned, it was like a new palette. Going with the Bode instruments, and certainly with what you brought, having played several of your NS Design basses and everything that are so much fun, but they're futuristic, but they're also playable artwork, and they sound great. So it's like you went in a totally different direction.
It doesn't sound, a moment of real satisfaction at the song that Tony Levin made one of the very first recordings with an NS upright, double bass. Walking on Air. I don't know if you've ever heard that song,
and Tony just turned 80.
He did.
Yeah.
And this was with King Crimson, and he's the beginning of I can't sing it because I get my voice terrible, but those like 3 or 4 notes, and then he drops into this low note that just sustained. And oh my God. All the work I did was worth it. Okay. Because he just knocked it out of the park and created a new sound. It was like, it wasn't a bass guitar. It wasn't an upright bass. I mean, in the traditional sense, it was an electric upright bass with a whole new dimension. And he just latched onto it. And oh my God, look what I can do here. And he did it. It's just amazing.
And that was one of those moments too, that I think really stood out, to where, and certainly credit to you, Ned, you didn't repeat yourself. you innovated again with NS Design, and it was Tony Levin playing that, with King Crimson, but then so many other artists, that have played your NS Design instruments, to where it's just kind of opened up a whole new area that you didn't really you reach out to some of these people with Steinberg.
Well, it's, you know, um, tradition plays a very strong role in music and musical instruments, and in some ways even more with musical instruments, because the music itself is this big exploration, but the instrument is sort of my old buddy from when I learned how to play this when I was 13 years old, or what have you. So there's a lot of resistance to new instruments, and which I respect. Actually, I think, after all, music is not about the instrument you play. It's about you and the music you're making. And so if you've got yourself the most fantastic instrument imaginable, great. But if you don't, and you got a beat up thing but you'll figure out how to make music on it, if you've got it in your heart and soul to do that, right? And so it's about the musician, but providing tools that enable the musician to express him or herself or theirselves. That's what it's all about.
Well, and I think that, certainly your artistic ability to create and design these, myriad of different instruments with Steinberger, with NS Design. And I was going to bring up some of the other, to where, I think that helps musicians like myself and other musicians, to where it brings out creativity in us because it plays and sounds different. And I was going to bring up, also, with the Spirit by Steinberger designs that you came out in, and I played and owned several of those as well, and they were at a great price point, but also they still had the look of a Steinberger, but were predominantly all wood.
They were all wood, and people play those instruments, and again, the carbon fiber thing is an alternative. It's not the only way. In other words, the one thing about it that it can be a little sometimes troubling, as someone who's designing, musical instruments and wanting to evaluate the design and understand if it's good or not so good, or where it's extremely subjective. What sound you want as a musician. So, carbon fiber gives you a more crispy, intense kind of sound, even throughout, relatively even throughout the fingerboard, and it has a drive to it. It has lows that are powerful. It has incredible high end. But hey, maybe you want to go plunk, 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 and that's what your music is about.
Right.
And the exact opposite of that. Well, that's totally cool too. So it's personal preference. But what I'm excited about is offering an alternative, sonic alternative that's totally electric oriented. In other words, not to say that you can't take an instrument, maybe a carbon fiber instrument, and of course they make carbon fiber acoustic guitars and so on, but that's another ball game. With the solid body electric, making it a carbon fiber and making it extremely rigid. And again, the concept there is to isolate the string. So you hear like the string, you pluck the string and you give it a certain amount of energy. That's it. That's all it's got. So if the string interacts with the instrument, and the neck is vibrating around and everything, and for example, an acoustic instrument cannot have the potential sustain that an electric instrument has, unless it's plugged in, of course, which is now it's starting to feed back. So that it gets to be interesting too, playing an acoustic instrument amplified and having the feedback as part of the sound. You can't get away from it. I mean, if you're really going to amplify an acoustic guitar significantly, the sound's going to change. It has to, because it interacts with the sound in the room, sustains longer and so on. But if you're anyway, I'm drifting away maybe from
No, not at all. I'm enjoying this, because my next question for you was going to be, what was the motivation for the Trans Trem? Because when that came out, there was nothing else like it. And when I played one, it was kind of mind blowing that you could change the total, you could do a half step drop, you could do a full drop, you could, the changes that you could do with the tunings with the bridge, with the Trans Trem. How did you come up with that, Ned?
Well, basically what happened was we came out with a guitar, 6-string guitar, which I was excited about doing, and we were seeing a lot of interest in that, and it was a new world for me. I was bass oriented. We 3 years just making basses or whatever, and then make guitars. Cool, a lot of fun, very exciting. And we get the guitar out there, and I said, "Where's the tremolo?" "What tremolo? What are you talking about?" So then I started to look into what a tremolo is. People were saying, "I want a tremolo," right? So, and I just took the tremolo, and holy cannoli, this thing is going out of tune. Like, you put all the tuning relationships are gone. Is that really good or not good? Or no, let's make them stay together. That sounded like the thing to do. Turned out to be a very challenging project, certainly. And it did actually find players who appreciated it.
Well, now, and I was going to bring up too, now, even with your tremolo,
Halen and all, that's how we got involved with him, and that was a very, very big deal for the company. Again, getting back to artists, if you can engage with a top level artist, and not with some BS with some, you pay them to promote you or something like that. No, I'm talking about the real deal, where the artist is excited because there's a tool that they didn't have before, that now they're making new music or they're refining their music. That's where it counts. And so the Trans Trem helped in that regard. And of course, there were a lot of challenges there that are highly technical, and they're not rocket science either. It's basic stuff, but it's, not something we can get into at the moment, how you could make it work. Okay. But
yeah,
I worked at it for very hard, and we were able to make it work. And there were surprises along the way and challenges that were just part of the game.
I was going to bring up too, Ned, that even when you came out, because I remember, like you said, the original models had the hardtail with the fine tuners at the bottom, and the double ball in strings for bass and guitar. But then with the tremolo, what was so innovative to me as well with the standard tremolo on the Steinberger was that you had the flip switch to where you could lock it in. So you can make the guitar a hardtail essentially, or a tremolo, with just one switch down at the bottom of it.
And the key thing, what makes that possible is to be able to adjust the spring tension to match the string tension. It's kind of a confusing set of words there, but
right.
The thing is so to be able to adjust the spring, fine tune that. So when you lock the instrument and tune it up, you lock the tremolo and tune it up, and then you unlock it, it has to stay in tune, and that you make sure that happens with the counter spring adjustability. And that's going on today on, moving forward to the moment today. I'm very much involved with this new Finn guitar project, which is and this is This is the very first bass, a 6-string bass, a Finn bass, that it has really been super exciting project for me, and it's just the evolution of this whole lifetime I spent. I'm you know at the end of the line here. Okay, I'm going to be 80 years old before you know it, and so a couple of years more. Okay, I don't want to overdo it, but still, it's the reality. When you get to this age, then you start to think about, what are your priorities? Because you don't have another 30 years. Okay,
No, but and you've got to have time for sailing in between. Yeah.
that too, all of the above, and
But I was going to bring up, I mean, and once again,
with your family and the people you love and all that, all of that stuff. So, but I don't want to make. I'm just saying that this evolution over all these years, and uh, the trans trem. When I did the trans trem, I understood very little about string construction. Frankly, again, I've learned a lot over these years. And the way strings are made is, the most important thing on your guitar is not the pickup. It's not the body or the neck, I mean, it's more complicated than that, but still the strings are huge. And I'm not saying, the pickups are huge too and all that, but the strings are a big deal, and they're very, thousandths of an inch here and there, a diameter of this or that makes a big difference. And I didn't really understand much about that, but having worked with the Dario company now for all these years,
yeah.
and also evolving even, independently in terms of my understanding of how strings work, but having the tremendous opportunity to work with them. Yeah, there's a lot of possibilities that I can imagine now that I didn't even understand at the time. And so a lot of what the trans trem was about is compensating for the fact that strings elongate at different rates. To really explain that in the context of this discussion is probably
And I always think about it, like the Pythagoras, you've got point to point with the Pythagoras theorem, and then anytime you hold down a note, you're changing that distance to make the note. And the trans trem being able to change that with the tremolo at the bottom of the guitar, no other instrument had brought that before, Ned.
well, the thing is that in order to make the trans trem work, you had to move each string at a different rate in order to get them to line up. Because, with a conventional tremolo, they all move together, and the G string would change pitch 3 times the rate of the E string, and the low E string too. Both the E strings are very low elongation, and excuse me, the low E string and the G string are very low elongation. The high E string on a guitar is a very long elongation. And, when you bend a note, it's impacted by those different stretch rates or elongation rates, whatever you want to call them.
Right.
It's something I've been really exploring over these last few years, and having, really very interesting time doing that. So I keep learning, hopefully, and
So, I was going to bring up also learning to where you launched the Synapses, which had the built-in capo on the neck, to where essentially, before you would have to take a capo and clamp it on and off and everything else. But what's so interesting with the Synapses instruments, Ned, was that it was part of it. And so you could go from a baritone instrument to a standard 6-string instrument, just go, zoop,
yep.
slide
It
it
was-
right up the neck. I mean, what a great design.
Well, thank you. It was, what can you do? That's the idea. What can you do to make something work? And of course, I've been involved with capos now with the Dario for
I was going to bring that up. Please talk about it, because I love the designs.
Well, we have a couple of different capo designs, essentially that with spring-loaded, and we have, and the beautiful thing about working with Jim DiDario, who is, the man behind the DiDario company, and not to take anything away from his brother and nephew and all kinds of great people there. So it's not just Jim DiDario, but he is certainly remarkably determined. That's just to make good stuff. And so we have 3 capo types, really. There's different price points and stuff like that, but there's the artist capo, which is spring-loaded overhead, so the neck is down here. It's like more like a Kaiser capo. Okay, sorry about that. But then there's the under the neck spring-loaded one, the tri-action, and that's the big part of that's I think our biggest seller. And then there is, the screw design where you adjust the tension with that. But what makes our capo, especially the spring-loaded capos, what's cool about those is they have adjustable tension. Adjustable tension is very important on a capo because you don't want to put more pressure on the strings than needed to hold them down to the frets. Otherwise, they go sharp.
Exactly.
And so people are constantly putting the capo on and retuning and combining adjustable tension with, what we call a flex fit rubber, which is kind of gushy and accommodates variations in the radius of the fingerboard and this type of thing. So capos we've had a lot of fun with those capos.
And I've played all of those too, Ned, and the designs, like you said, and there's nothing worse than certainly here in Nashville when you play some songwriter rounds and people, will use capos that throw their strings sharp and not retune them, and it kind of drives me crazy. But with your designs to where you can change that tension up, and certainly like I play a lot of different instruments, whether it be 12-string, mando guitar, banjo guitar, on and on. But, you need different tension for different strings and different instruments. And so one tension does not fit all. And I think it always makes me smile whenever I pick up something that has NS design on it and I know that you're behind it, and working with Dario, like you were saying, for all these years, and that you're like in the background, you're like the mad scientist in your workshop coming up with this stuff, and then they're putting it out to the public.
Well, you've got to give people at DiDario credit, and other people need to be credited too for the things that we've been able to accomplish together. But certainly, for example, again, getting back to Jim, I remember him telling me at one point that, Ned, this capo is too complicated. You gotta fix it. And I'm going. And the result of that, pressure is not quite the right word. That encouragement or that require, what I'm not sure what the right word is, but that ultimately led to a huge improvement in the design. So it's a symbiotic relationship I have with them, and also with my team at NS Design. We work together on. It's not just me, and lately I've been working quite closely with Sancor Composite Technologies. Those are the ones who have created this, who have fabricated the Finn guitars and basses, all 100% carbon fiber. And it's a two-way street. We work together, we make it happen. And, the same is true. For example, one of the key things of this new guitars we're doing is the hardware, the tuners. Okay. So these are tuners that are, and this tuner here, this is for the bass. You can see it's bigger, they're different. The bass face back. These tuners face up because it's a guitar and it's different than a bass. All these things that have evolved over the years with the work I've been doing. It also is something I do with people who make it possible. And for these instruments are made by the RWB Precision Engineering Company, and they're in LA. And God bless them. They've been so incredibly supportive and have made beautiful products. So it's a team effort.
Definitely. And I think that's, you've always done a great job of keeping creative people around you, just like, with Jim, just, a very creative guy, heading up the company. But, talking about Finn and everything else with the new instruments, are there going to be new instrument launches this year that we're going to be seeing from NS Design and with Finn?
Absolutely. First of all, in the area of Bode Electrics, we're introducing new supports, systems, stands and straps and so on. One of the things we're excited about with I'm excited about, and I think the team is excited about, and musicians are excited about, are making instruments more comfortable to play, more versatile. For example, to take a cello and have a system for a strap that really works, so you can, be on stage with, just like a guitar player or whatever, and you're not stuck in a chair. And certainly also for the bass, we have, strap systems. You can take a double bass, with a 42-inch string length. We didn't get into what that's all about, but it's a big deal to have long strings and still be able to be mobile on stage, not locked into one position. So there are so many different things about the Bode Electric instruments that are ongoing development projects. But on the other hand, we now have taken a new level of interest in the guitars. It's kind of an evolution of, getting back to my roots, right? And we're very excited about that. We have a lot of development work we've been doing, and that we will be, for example, we started out with this 6-string limited edition. That's the first bass, made, we have 12 instruments that we made from the original mold, which was not meant to be a permanent mold, but a temporary mold. So, and these are fantastic instruments. And we made also, a run of 12 guitars, and people, getting a huge amount of, in fact, what's interesting is in my whole career, I've never had so much enthusiasm about the new product that we've had with this Finn guitar and bass, which is, incredible. And it's not as though we hadn't had some enthusiasm about product, but this is like over the top. So very, much appreciated by me, and also motivating, because of, wow, okay, this is resonating with people. Let's make sure we make it happen. So we're going to be, what we're doing now actually is we're working on 2 projects that are, from the Finn guitars. One is the Finn hybrid guitar. When I say hybrid, we're talking about a guitar which is primarily wood, and which is visually wood, and beautiful, beautiful figured maple tops and stuff like that, which people really enjoy. And I enjoy. I mean, I was a woodworker to start with. I got involved in carbon fiber because of the physical properties of it. And I'm a big believer in the all composite, base we have here and so on. But a lot of people would like to have a piece of wood, to touch and to be the visual and the tactile sense of the wood and the history and the tradition and all of that good stuff, right? So this hybrid instrument has those qualities, plus internally it has highly reinforced structure of carbon fiber. So that's why it's a hybrid. It's wood and carbon fiber combination. And
So the carbon fiber is internal.
the composite is internal. The look and feel are a little more traditional that way. And again, I mean, I get it. Wood is a beautiful thing. So you get that. And you get and it's also a little bit of a hybrid sonically. It doesn't sound the same as the all carbon fiber. It's a little bit mellowed out, but it's still, compared to an all wood guitar, more brilliant and sustained. So it's that hybrid quality that is exciting to do. And we're definitely, that's where we're focused right now. And those are going to be available shortly, really this year for sure. And we're doing in the bass, we're going to, and we're very active and engaged in doing the 5-string all composite bass. So these projects will evolve in different directions over time, but we're, and there's a lot to it. So I wish it could happen yesterday. I mean, this whole thing has taken, too long.
It seems like you're just excited, though, as excited as you were. And I mean, it's hard to believe.
I'm very excited.
Not to 80, I mean, when you launched Steinberger, Sound Corporation, and, to where, I mean, that's 46 years ago. And you're just as excited or more excited now with these new designs on it, Ned.
Well, I wouldn't want to try to say which was which or which was more, but certainly, and there's it's, I don't want to dwell on it too much, but there's this reality that I can't do this forever. I can't decide I want to take 10 years off and go on a vacation and come back and go, no, I have to do it now.
Right.
Just the reality of it. And so I'm on it. And like I say, I have a great team and great people that I work with that make it possible. So there you are.
That's incredible. Well, I want to mention too, Acoustic Coffee Company. If you're a fan of coffee as myself, use the code Gear Gab, get 20% off your first bag, your first order of coffee, and Ned will be getting coffee sent to him as well for coming on the show. I wanted to bring up one last thing, Ned, to where I was thinking about you got to do that. It's like a thank you for coming on the show. Everybody's say caffeinated. What do you think about it, Ned? And I think about this often, with vintage instruments, to where when you see a lot of your early instruments and prototypes and everything else now have become so collectible. And certainly, I mean, people search them out because I know myself, it's like I remember seeing and playing the first Steinberger instruments that came out and seeing those musicians on MTV and in tour and on tour, and playing them live. And now, I mean, the prices, I mean, it's gotten crazy with some of your early instruments. What's your feeling about that?
I think that's great. It's amazing. I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean,
Well, do you feel vilified? Because I mean, once again, when we talked before and you brought it up briefly, to where when you came out with the original, with your headless design and trying to sell, work with other companies to do the concept, everybody's like, no, that's too future. That's too forward. And now
too weird. Whatever. Yeah.
But now look at all these companies now, Strandberg and so on, and many companies that are now making headless instruments that never did before. And I think a lot of that is credited to you and your designs with Steinberg.
Well, Strandberg has been a huge success. And my congratulations. That's really very, and so it's, things have evolved, and but I think for example, you were talking about how when I started out and people were going, that's just too weird, even though I saw musicians really relating to it on a one by one, not everyone, but maybe 1 in 3 musicians would, whoa, the hell is this? That is so cool, blah, 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 So certainly if I didn't have that input, I would never have pursued it further. It would have been, if you're going to make an instrument that musicians don't want to play, what's the point, right? But a lot of people saw this as just, too weird or, too futuristic or whatever, particularly people in business. And they said to me, weird guitars don't sell. Sorry, good luck. It wasn't mean-spirited or anything. It was just they knew where their business was, and they knew that weird guitars don't sell. But so what happened? This guitar was weird, but it was highly functional.
Exactly.
It was the real deal. I believe that. I put my heart and soul into that. And so that's why that's why Headless is, growing now in a dynamic way, because it's the real deal. It really works, and has those essential benefits, and fitting it into the overhead and the plane to how it sounds, and all the different aspects of it, its versatility. So
It's exciting. I got to bring up too on it, Ned, to where are you going to have other NS designs also, like with the capos and with so many other things that you and your team do? Are we going to see more innovations coming out from that, from your NS design company and you in the coming year?
I hope so. Although, truly, no, I'm. It's only so far I can at this stage in my career. It's about taking what I've learned. That when I made the trans trem 40 how many years ago. Okay, there's so much I know now that I didn't know then. I'm trying to connect it all together while I still have a chance to do it. So who knows what it will lead to. But it'll keep me busy anyway. I could tell you that, and so
And it will keep you musicians happy too.
well, it's so satisfying to make musicians happy. Not always successful at it, but, then the strings start breaking, and God only knows what happens. And so it isn't always peaches and cream, but it's an endeavor that, and it's a shared thing, because I think that there is a mutual respect that develops, so I certainly, have huge respect for musicians, as I've described earlier, but I think musicians also, appreciate that an effort is being made to assist them in their work. And that's what I try to do.
Well, and to me, Ned, what you've always done and continue to do is create playable artwork, to where not only is it do the instruments sound great and play great and and impervious to humidity or dry conditions or whatever, like you said, very portable, but also to me they're aesthetically pleasing to look at your instruments, and once again you look at them and you imagine what music you can make with. I think, and that's the
Well,
bomb.
There's 3 things about a musical instrument, really, that count, that are really important. One is the sound, obviously. Okay. 2 is the playability. How comfortable it is, or, whether it's buzzing or what, stuff like that, all of those things. And the third is the way it looks. And don't discount that. If it doesn't look right, it'll never get played. So, they're kind of, in my view, over these years of experience, they're kind of, obviously sound is hugely important, but if it's not easy to play and fun to play, then you might prefer an instrument that didn't sound quite as good, but which really played well, right? Because they're really important together, to work together. And the way it looks fits right into that. They're all kind of equal value.
I agree. Well, Ned Steinberger, thank you so much for coming on the show. We can't wait to see the new Finn instruments, the hybrid instruments, and of course, all of the incredible work that you do with NS Design. Like I said, every time I pick up a product and I see NS Design on there, it makes me smile. And I think about your creativity and innovation behind it. And you're this excited, at this point in your career to be creating new stuff. That's not a bad thing, Ned.
Oh, I'm very happy about it, and I appreciate your support, and I just feel very lucky to do this kind of work.
And I hope you get some good sailing time in too, Ned.
We will. It's on its way, and we got the boat in the water. I have a partner in my boat now, which is very cool. A younger man, huge to have him as part of what we're doing, and so he and I, we'll get to do some sailing and along with family and so on. So it's sailing is a wonderful thing. All right, I've talked long enough. I got to let you go. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ned.
Thanks for joining the Gear Gab Podcast with Eric Dahl. Subscribe to our weekly conversations on your favorite platform. And if you like what you hear, don't forget to leave us a review. Follow us on social media at Gear Gab Podcast. You'll never know who our next guest will be.